Hi everybody, this is Gary Rhinehart from Heart to Heart with Gary Rhinehart, and I'm here once again with Patrick Krause, Director of the HFM Four Rivers Alliance Coalition. How are you doing today, Pat?
Very good, Gary. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, if you remember the last time we spoke, we were talking about the dangers of marijuana and driving while high was the main part, and then we kind of got more into various parts of that subject. Today is a little different. We're going to be talking about e-cigarettes, something that has been on the market, I'd say, for at least a decade or so. It's a very wide variety now than it was when it first came out. I remember when they first came out, it was the blue one was the one everyone had, where even when I was a kid I thought it was cool because it would light up, and just that fact was like I didn't even care about the same, but the fact that it lit up on the end with the little blue light, I was like, that's so cool.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the very first ones, and they found out actually that people really didn't want that. They didn't want something that looked like a traditional cigarette, and they wanted that there's a stigma attached to that. So they found out that really other styles and other versions of that would do better. So, but you're right, a little over a decade or so, maybe about 12 years. The first ones first started coming out.
And now you see them in all shapes and sizes and variations. And like you said, they don't look like traditional cigarettes anymore. In fact, a lot of them, I feel, look like you're putting a USB port into your mouth. So you're like uploading something into your brain.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, the most popular e-cigarette, the Juul, that's the brand name, looks very much like a USB device. You charge it on your laptop or your computer in the USB port. And that's one of the reasons it's become a problem with kids for use, because it's so easy to hide, it's under the radar, and it's part of the whole attraction of this particular e-cigarette, and why it's being used so much by kids.
I actually spoke with someone who's a teacher, and they said one of the hardest things is the older generation of teachers who have never seen these things. Students will actually go up to them and say, "Hey, I need to charge my USB in your computer. Can I do that?" And to them, and like I said, it looks just like a USB port, so they don't know any better. So they plug it in during class, and the kid gets it after they're done. They're like, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Whatever," and then you go smoke it in the bathroom.
Yeah, no, that definitely happened in the beginning. And parents and teachers were, I won't say clueless, but. This was happening right under the noses, and they didn't know it, that the kids were somehow getting these e-cigarettes devices, which legally they couldn't get because it's 18 or more in some markets, but they were getting them anyway. And you've got millions, literally, I think like 3 million kids under 18 are currently using them. That's the estimate.
All right. Could you explain how exactly an e-cigarette works? Or at least, like, in a general sense. I know that there's many different ways.
There's many different kinds. So an e-cigarette is a way to consume nicotine in a way it's a non-combustible way of consuming nicotine. We'll talk about nicotine first. So it has a storage compartment. It could be a refillable pod or a compartment, or non-refillable cartridges. It has a heating element, has a battery of some kind, and then the device itself. Those are basically the four main parts. There are a lot of different kinds. Some are adjustable. You can adjust the heating element for different reasons. But basically, you have a e-juice or a nicotine liquid that's stored in it. That can be replaced. The Juul, which you mentioned, have little pods that come in different flavors, and they are inserted into the end. They turn on different ways, but that's basically it. It heats up to a temperature that's hot enough to take the nicotine juice and turning it into a vapor. Now, you hear the word vaping all the time. It's not really a vapor, because a vapor is liquid. Say steam is water that is heated up to a certain point and turns into a vapor. More precise term is an aerosol, because you're talking about taking a liquid that has nicotine into it, heating it up, and it turns it into a mist or like a vapor. But an aerosol is really the technical term. So it's a way of consuming nicotine in a way that's a non-combustible form and avoids all the consuming the 5,000 chemicals that are in tobacco smoke.
Yeah.
As opposed to the approximately 80 at the maximum that are in e-cigarette vapor.
Now that's a main argument that people who vape make, is the fact that it doesn't have like 90% of the chemicals a cigarette has. It would mean that it is safer, but that's not.
Well, I guess two things on that. There's certainly a case to be made for that. A lot of the proponents, both in government, academic world, and in the companies that are making them, including Juul, are saying that we are trying to get smokers to switch to something that's safer. Something like 480,000 people a year in the United States die from smoking-related diseases. So the belief is if we can switch, if these people can't quit, have them switch to something safer. So there's a case to be made for that. The industry groups like the American Vaping Association often refer to e-cigarette use as a form of harm reduction, which is a term that's used in substance abuse prevention a lot. That we can provide a different way of doing things. It's a way to save some lives or prevent diseases from happening and the like. On the other hand, with e-cigarettes, even though they're regulated by the FDA as a form of tobacco consumption, are pretty much unregulated. The FDA has allowed these companies to grow and market and provide their devices, while at the same time giving them till 2022 to actually provide all the information to them that as far as regulation goes. So we're just starting to find out, what are the health effects of vaping, and there's just studies coming out recently regarding harm to the circulatory system, even vaping stuff without nicotine, just the vape liquid itself that's vaporized, damaging cell linings in your arteries and veins. And so on the other hand, we don't really know what the health effects of it are. Yeah. But I think you could maybe make the conclusion that on average it's safer than cigarettes. So for adults, you can make the argument there's a place for it.
Yeah, I've heard a few of the different, lingo of stuff that can happen. One of the major ones, popcorn lung, where the membrane in your lungs expands to the point that they can't retract.
Right.
Therefore, you can't get a full breath in because they don't retract and expand like they used to.
Yeah, there have been cases of what's called popcorn lung, which is definitely a disease that can result from vaping. Not very many, but more recently, just this past summer up till this week, there have been an explosion of vaping-related lung diseases, very serious, landing people. They think about 400 people so far across the United States have been hospitalized for serious illnesses, lung illnesses, forms of pneumonia and the like, including landing on having to be on ventilators. And so far, 2 people have died, one in Illinois and one in Oregon. And so the question is, what's causing this? They know it's vaping related, but it's something new has entered the vaping world, and we're just starting to find out what that is.
Yeah. Well, in researching those articles, a lot of them had stated that a lot of the products that were used in those injuries and deaths were street versions of that. And we talked a little bit when we were speaking on marijuana about the more advanced e-cigarettes. I'm blanking kind of on the proper name, but the ones that are like the size of my hand, like the big ones that people can tweak and they can adjust the heating range, the coils, I have friends who smoke these sort of things, and I think half the fun is just being able to open it up and tinker with it on an electronics scale. and they're like, oh, I put in this new coil, I have to put in this new thing, I put in this atomizer, which I thought was like some sort of gamma radiation thing. Like, what was an atomizer?
Yeah, when you asked me about e-cigarettes, I gave a really simple, reduced version. They can have a lot more other components, atomizers and temperature regulators and all kinds of things. The ones you're talking about still exist, but I think they've fallen out of favor. People have gone to much more simpler things like the Juul, what are called vape pens. And I'm glad it's good that you brought up the question of vaping marijuana or vaping THC. Because, of course, what's going on in the United States is, I think, three things. Great increase of use of e-cigarettes by adults with probably a corresponding reduction in use of cigarettes. An epidemic use of e-cigarettes for nicotine among kids under 18. Huge numbers, and out of nowhere over just 3 years. Up to here in Hamilton County with 12th graders, we found 50% of 12th graders in Hamilton County in the survey we did last year have tried e-cigarettes. That's the national rate is more like 30%, but still it's very high. You're talking about between 10 and 30% of kids from 8th to 12th grade. National surveys show you have tried or using e-cigarettes for nicotine. But of course, that's not the only thing you can vaporize and you can consume. You can consume cannabis, THC, oil through vaporizers in almost exactly the same way. And in the legal states, California or Washington, Colorado, you can buy vape pens. Some of them are refillable, some of them are single use. You can buy Juul-ready THC cartridges manufactured legally under quality control, small little disposable cartridges that you plug into your Juul device, and those are legal. Of course, there are a lot of states where marijuana is still illegal, so now if you want to get that, you're buying on the black market.
Yeah, and when I looked at the article you provided for me, through the website Leafy, a lot of the illegal drugs look legit because they come in a box. It's a nice looking box. The one that was on there had an alien on it. It looked like if I saw it, I would have thought this was a legal substance. And what it ended up being was a cheap knockoff from China that comes over, and then people put it into their devices and you don't know what's in it. Much like any illegal drug that you get from the street, you don't know what's in it, and then you start smoking it. And the one quote that made me kind of chuckle was, the guy's like, well, what do you think was going to happen when you started smoking stuff that you don't know what's in it? Where, like, if you have it in a state where it's regulated, at least it kind of helps that you know what's in it. Not to say that makes it any safer, but at least you kind of know what's in it.
Yeah. Well, you're right. There's a huge market. I mean, in the United States, it's estimated the marijuana market, including everything smokable and everything, is probably about $40 billion a year. The legal market is maybe a quarter of that right now. So that leaves still a huge black market, as there always has been. But now for kids and adults, the almost preferred way of consuming marijuana is vaping, which is consuming marijuana oil, which has been extracted from the plant, which is generally odorless, and it's partly because it's so undetectable. So you can buy vape pens, and that can be utilized with different oils, cartridges, refillable, whatever, and consume it. So you're right and you mentioned China, but also coming out of California. And these are manufactured in legal factories, and they're marketed. I have some pictures here of what they suspect. A couple of the brands that have been found in relation to the recent vaping illnesses. There's one called Chronic Carts with cartridges. It's a little package, and it has a window, and you can see the cartridge. And that has a flavor. We talked a lot about e-cigarettes having flavors, Juul having flavors like creme brulee and mint and cucumber, one of the reasons they've been so popular with kids. Well, here's these vape cartridges, THC cartridges with flavors like Sour Patch and Runts. and they look like they're colorful. They look like it's a manufactured, regulated, but they're made in these illicit factories and then marketed all over the country. So they're finding out most of the recent illnesses they've traced to. They believe that it's from people vaping cannabis oil. Now, when you have cannabis oil, generally you mix it with something else. Because what consumers are looking for, and so it works right, is an additive that gives the liquid viscosity, so it looks thick, and that's what the consumers believe is good quality. So they've used a lot of different substances. What they're thinking are going now, right, with all these serious illnesses, is that using vitamin E acetate, which is a vitamin E oil. Vitamin E is, of course, a vitamin. You can take supplements. You can put it on your skin as a topical. In oil form, it's called vitamin E acetate. Well, what happens when you vape an oil, of course, it's vaped into the microscopic droplets, gets into your lungs, and then when it cools down, it turns back into oil form. Well, your lungs don't like having been coated with oil. No. So they have inflammation will result. The body thinks it's under attack. More cells go in there, fat cells, fluid. There's a type of pneumonia called lipoid pneumonia, which can be caused by injuries to your lungs, but the other way is to somehow getting oil. Years ago, there were some cases of children getting forms of lipoid pneumonia from ingesting petroleum jelly or Vaseline. Parents would put it around. You probably, had your kid. We've probably done it. Put a little Vaseline under your lip. Mm-hmm. You ingest that and get it into your lungs. You can have some serious illnesses. There were probably over a decade. There was a case in Canada of lipoid pneumonia. It's one of the earliest cases of someone making a home brew to consume marijuana with vitamin E or anyway. They're pretty sure most of these serious cases of lung disease are being caused, to conclude, by these cannabis cartridges that are being sold on the black market all over the country. And for whatever reason, the manufacturers decided to use, there may be other stuff, but they know right now it looks like this form of vitamin E, which is an oil that is in the lungs and is not good and causing real serious, and a couple of deaths so far. It looks like the one in Oregon that they believe right now, and I don't think it's been proven or definitely documented, came from a legal dispensary. So it's possible there are some legal vape cartridges on the market in the legal states that may have this in it or something else. But that's, if you're following news right now, that's one of the dangers of vaping, and one of the trends that we're looking at in states like New York State, which have so far have held off on legalizing recreational marijuana, is this real big trend among younger people, under 18, but 18 to 25, of consuming marijuana through vaping.
Yeah. Now I'm about to probably get myself in trouble, especially with my grandmother. So if my grandmother's listening, I'm sorry I'm about to admit this. I've actually tried e-cigarettes before.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, you can get a pretty nice flavor from these e-cartridges. And even if you've never smoked one, you're outside and you smell cotton candy. I always call it the cloud of lies, because you're smelling like strawberries, you're smelling donuts, you're smelling vanilla, and you're thinking, oh, that smells really, and then it's right. Somebody vaping. But to a kid who just like how I was kind of enthralled with just the little blue light, I could see them getting enthralled with, oh, this smells like my favorite candy, yep. Sour Patch Kids or Runs or whatever. And then it tastes just like it, yep. Maybe with a little kick from the actual getting it into your lungs and stuff. Luckily, and I'd like to tell my grandma this, I don't do it on a regular basis. It was like a 1 or 2 time thing.
Yeah, well, it's good that you tried it. Because I never have, but it's good to have done that, because then you kind of understand the attraction. Imagine if you're a 14 or 15-year-old, and somebody says, try this, and you take a hit. And I've read accounts of kids saying this, like, it tasted good. It was mint or a fruit flavor or something. Mm-hmm. And then I got this rush, And then I felt great. Well, that you just consume nicotine and are under the influences. Your brain is getting hit by this high level of nicotine. We haven't mentioned with devices like the Juul that the little tiny pods, they're about the size of your thumbnail, contain as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. The companies found out a way to boost the uptake to the brain by adding benzoic acid in with the nicotine, which makes it comparable to a cigarette delivery. So you're getting a big hit of nicotine right away. And with kids, with a developing teenage brain that's susceptible to addiction, it's still growing and developing until you're in your 20s, the fruit flavors, I think the culture that surrounds it, peer pressure and all that, it's been a real toxic mix of influences and also happening under the radar. Plus, including parents don't know what's in it, think it's harmless. I've read numerous cases of say teachers saying, they confiscated an e-cigarette device from kids, and then at the end of the day, the parent getting it and giving it back to them. So one of the things we're doing as a prevention agency is really trying to educate parents, teachers, kids on what's in these things, because people think it's just water vapor or flavorings, and it's not. It's a way of consuming nicotine, and the question is, are we now creating a whole new generation? After all the success in stopping cigarette smoking, are we now creating a new generation of kids who are addicted to this drug? And it is a drug, and as anyone who knows someone who smoked, it's very hard to quit. And kids have gone into, parents have had kids who are 14, 15 years old, addicted to nicotine, addicted to juuling. It's a verb also. Addicted to juuling, and trying to find someone to get them into some kind of treatment program, and having a hard time finding anything. So that's, again, another part of the problem. It rewires your brain, and real possibility that leads to other addictions. Not necessarily a gateway drug per se, but a brain that's wired to be addicted to one substance is very likely to possibly be attracted to other things. So that then leads into a lot of kids who vape nicotine also vape pot. So, and that's one of the trends we see coming down the line that we're trying to head off. And that's one of the things we do, the Four Rivers Alliance does, is try and educate in the county about vaping, marijuana commercialization, and that the kids are using more and more are using these things like causing all these illnesses, these illicit black market carts.
Yeah, I mean, it must be very difficult to get help for something that society hasn't really deemed that harmful. I mean, I've never had to go seek therapy for these types of things, but when you look at our culture, I know marijuana use is becoming more accepted, especially you watch the movies and things like that. So if someone was having a hard time getting off it, sometimes it's kind of hard to get the help, because it's like, well, it's so accepted now. That's like, who do I even turn to? Because some people will be like, well, it's not a problem.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for both of them. I mean, you can get addicted to marijuana. I mean, the estimates are 10 to 30% of users will develop just like any other addictive drug, a substance use disorder. In the psychiatric manuals, cannabis is in there as a substance use disorder. People can get addicted and then have to find treatment and go into recovery to get. And the same thing, of course, is with nicotine, which is legal. New York State just, and I think will help a lot, raise the age, and I believe in November it will be going into effect that it'll be 21. Part of the problems with the whole epidemic with kids vaping is it's just so easy to get. You can go and you can have someone go into a store and buy it for you. If find someone who's 18. So raising the age, I think, will help a lot with this. But there really hasn't been a lot of good regulation. The FDA are trying to work, and Juul has said they're working with the FDA to prevent kids from getting the flavored cartridges. Kids, the data's there. Kids say like 75% of them said they wouldn't be doing this if they couldn't get flavored versions of these e-juices. So a lot of them, but of course what happens is the bigger companies will stop marketing them or at least take them out of retail stores, but then black market, comes in versions, or other companies will make Juul compatible cartridges. So it's tough. It's really a lot about education. There's been some, talk about banning e-cigarettes. San Francisco totally banned e-cigarettes. I think it goes into effect next year. Just recently this week, Michigan, through the governor's executive order, also totally banned e-cigarettes, and people are pushing back against that. So, and it was interesting that she mentioned these recent illnesses as a reason to ban e-cigarettes. It's a stretch, and maybe is not a really good public health move because we know these serious illnesses are coming from these black market cartridges that kids and people are vaping. And many people were also vaping nicotine, but it looks like at this point it's mostly illegal THC cartridges that are causing these illnesses with vitamin E or other things added in as into the mix. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, we find that over the years, as marijuana has been legalized, and I think it's 11 states now, we find in our survey data here in Hamilton County, and that's one of the main things we try and do is see what the trends are, what's going on, and there's definitely a perception of harm of marijuana slowly going down since we've been doing surveys of kids here in the schools the last 7 years, and use is slowly going up. For alcohol and tobacco, cigarettes have gone way down. Alcohol has improved, is still kind of high in some categories like binge drinking and at the higher grades. But so we look at what's coming down the road. Marijuana legalization for 18 and over. The diversity and the sophistication of various e-cigarette devices that are easily used for consuming cannabis, and then the perception by kids that the stuff's safe. If it's legal, it's got to be safe, right? So those are really hard things to fight against. But
Now you mentioned part of your program is to educate parents on the dangers of these e-cigarettes. And if the people listening here have listened to the station, we've had PSAs about speaking to your kids about the dangers of drugs and how you're one of the biggest influences in people's lives, or in your children's lives, I should say. One of the hardest things, I believe, is when you yourself are a smoker or a user of these products and you try to talk to your children, because for me, I feel like it can go either one or two ways. One, your child sees the effects that it's had on you, the coughing, the hacking, the diseases that come with it, and may get turned off. But then on the other end, you have kids that are like, well, if you're doing it,
right,
and now you're telling me I can't do it, you're just being a hypocrite.
Well, one thing to say is, I'm an adult and you're not. And to really, if a parent is used to smoke and say switch to an e-cigarette, and they say I'm doing this because I think this is, it's safer. It's safer for me. It's less harmful, less chemicals. And yes, I'd like to quit, but it's hard. It's tough, but I think you do want to educate the kids and say, look, I don't want you starting this. Okay, I started when I was young. You can get addicted. Your brain is still developing. Hold off. Drinking, you can't drink until you're 21. Okay, if you want to then have a beer or whatever when you're 21, that's your choice. It's illegal. It's a legal product in the United States, but you have to still, I think, talking to your kids makes a big difference, and also become informed on, for instance, we're talking a lot about vaping and e-cigarettes today, is become informed with what's in them and what the health effects and the dangers are.
Yeah, a lot of people I've talked to who have smoked or are smoking say it's one of the biggest regrets they've ever had was to start, because it is so hard to get done. And My mom was a heavy smoker, and she unfortunately never got off it until she died.
Yeah.
But I saw her struggle with the tremors, the irritability, the sweating, the withdrawals can be very strong when you try to stop stuff like this.
Well, we know nicotine is very addictive, and we know with kids, the younger you start, the more likely you are to develop an addiction to that or anything. The data is there. It's overwhelming. So that's the thing, is you try and keep kids from starting this. And we definitely have an epidemic of e-cigarette use among kids under 18. Hopefully that's peaked, but how many of them are daily users and are really hooked on it, at 14, 15, 16 years old? There's our data shows a lot of past 30-day use in our last survey, but a lot of the questions look like, trying it maybe a couple of times, 1 to 5 times in the past month or something. So hopefully a lot of this is kind of a, youthful experimentation. But for kids, it's very easy. You can get addicted to nicotine in a week. It isn't like you have to do it for a long time. It's very, very easy for it to for the young brain to develop an addiction, and then your brain is really wired differently, and it's hard. So yeah, it's hard. I think you have to we're really trying to educate kids on this. Definitely about all of the dangerous stuff out there, all the black market stuff. This is really the chance of getting very sick or dying from these illicit products that are out there. And one of the big questions too is in the case of the company Juul, which came out of Pax Labs, California. Now, the makers of this one device have about over 70% of the e-cigarette market. They dominate. They created a sophisticated, easy to use device that people love, and their company's worth something like $13 billion now. And 2 guys did this as a startup. What's happening is the big tobacco companies are really, a lot of the e-cigarette products in the past were manufactured, were promoted by cigarette. Juul is unique. It was developed as a startup, but last year, Altria, which makes Marlboro, bought about a little over a third of the Juul companies. So they see a lot of more regulation coming down of cigarettes. So they're investing into e-cigarettes, and it's it looks like a real cynical move to, and of course a lot of them are investing in cannabis too. In beverage companies, there's huge mergers and investments with the big Canadian marijuana growers and beverage companies, the big multinationals like InBev and Constellation. All these are all investing and looking and developing cannabis beers and beverage like it. So there's huge money behind this, and with kids, the main thing we're really trying to do is this epidemic of vaping with kids kind of came out of nowhere. Juul's being sued by different states and investigated. There's parents who've sued Juul saying that they promoted to kids deliberately with their early marketing, their early social media marketing. A lot of ads of young people having fun, promoting parties, and also the different flavors that this was their public faces that were trying to get adults to switch to this safer alternative. But did they intentionally market towards teens and young people in the very early? They've totally changed their marketing under all the pressure and scrutiny Juul has. If you listen to hear their ads on the radio now or television, they'll have an interview with a real person who said they used to smoke and now they switch. I heard one the other day. So they're very much emphasizing. They've totally changed their advertising. But in the early days, it's so much evidence that they really marketed towards young people.
Yeah, and one of the difficult things you kind of mentioned, big brands, big companies, is that push between we want to sell this product and the time it takes to really know what kind of effects it has. like we mentioned at the beginning of the interview, these e-cigarettes have been out for about 12 years. So we're kind of getting into that window of, okay, we now can see what the long-term effects are, but it's, you see these big companies, they really push, like, we really want to put this on the market, and you see all the time they put it out a lot of people would say too soon, and then, 10 years down the line, it's like, oh, we should have realized this now that we have the long-term studies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. And it's just a question of whether definitely in the case of this, has there been enough government regulation of the FDA has the power to do it. I mean, they ban, you can't have flavored cigarettes. They ban that. They certainly had the authority to have stopped all these flavored e-cigarette products from coming on the market, and they didn't do it. Now they're trying to catch up. So it's a failure of government entities doing what they could have done. And we're just really starting to get studies of the health effects of vaping. It's just starting to come out. That all should have done first. So
right.
How many times have we had cases of this where things are marketed and provided to the public and really aggressively marketed, and then had real serious consequences? Of course, the obvious example of that is the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma invented OxyContin in the mid-90s, and the biggest public health crisis that we've ever had is still ongoing. Hundreds of thousands of people have died of drug overdoses, opioid overdoses, including from prescription drugs, and that the agencies that could have stopped this, the FDA, the DEA, really didn't do what they should have done, and it's been a catastrophe. And now we're spending billions of dollars trying to turn it around, and something like 400,000 people have died of opioid overdoses in the past little under 20 years. So. Yeah. That's the obvious example.
Yeah. But you even look at cigarettes and the fact that, you look at advertisements from the 40s, the 50s, even before that, and after that for many years. Some of the ones that astound me the most are like 4 out of 5 doctors recommend Marlboro cigarettes. And nowadays, you're just like, no doctor would go near anything like that. Right. But it took a long time for the government to step in and say, okay, we see the long-term effects of cigarette smoking, we should probably start doing something. And I hope that it doesn't take nearly that long with something like this to be like, okay, we should probably at least regulate, and make sure that this is as safe as possible, I guess, product for people.
Yeah. Well, in the case of the tobacco industry, and we can look at that and think of big marijuana right now as just being a replay of that whole thing. It's the health effects were known and quite a while ago as far as smoking and cancer, and at every stage the tobacco companies fought back, tried to co-opt it. Switch, try and market differently, come out with light cigarettes and filtered cigarettes, and just always try to, it's just the enormous power and enormous concentration of money to fight back against any kind of regulation. We saw that with the big pharma and opioids, the same thing. And you think we're gonna start to learn some lessons, and you were saying this now with e-cigarette uses, the big companies like Juul are spending hundreds of $1,000s a year on lobbying in Washington, and they're adapting, but they have no intention of stopping marketing these things when we really don't know the long-term health effects. It's an experiment on public health, really. There's a lot, as I said, there's a lot of academics, a lot of people, including the medical industry, that defend it, just saying, okay, this is a form of harm reduction. We know it's better than smoking cigarettes, so it's not, it'd be better to quit, but if you can't quit, if you're an adult, to switch to vaping, using an e-cigarette is probably safer. But again, just repeating what I think we talked about, we don't really know the health effects. We don't really know what's in them, and there are a lot of really harmful chemicals in vaping, in the vapor that comes from e-cigarettes, from nicotine. I mean, dozens. A lot of them are banned in California, Prop 65 as carcinogens, or some of them are in small amounts, but all depends at the temperature. If it's very complicated, you heat up these. Generally, an e-juice is nicotine, propylene glycol, benzoic acid, flavorings, sugar. But when you heat up the e-juice, new chemicals are created. They can minute particles can come out of the metal of the device itself, including lead, cadmium, copper. So they're finding all trace elements of heavy metals in the vapor as well. So again, this is all an experiment. We're still trying to find out what the health effects of this is.
Yeah. And it's just, like I said, it's just difficult when you got a company who wants it out really fast, and then you've got the people like, we should wait at least 10 years minimum to see what this all does.
Might be a better idea to say, okay, we're proposing this product, and then the FDA will say, okay, we're going to study this for 10 years, and then we'll let you market it, after we actually know what it does.
Yeah.
And it seems to happen over and over again, and I think, it's a political question. It talks about the power of big companies and the lack of power of the public, really, and whether it's big tobacco or big pharma or big vape, big pot. The companies that are, as I've said, investing. It's not small farmers. It's big companies that are pushing and lobbying, and investing in legalizing marijuana. When you talk about doctors, the early days of cigarettes, 4 out of 5 doctors smoke a Camel or whatever.
I remember Joe Camel.
Yeah. Well, now people have come to think of marijuana as a medicine, because so many states have medical marijuana programs, and that was a definite strategy, saying, well, we might not do so well trying to legalize marijuana, so let's start to legalize it as a medicine first, even though there's really no studies supporting, marijuana as some for some things, but the states have just rolled over and have legalized. How many other medicines do you smoke?
Yeah. Well, like I was going to say, to be fair, there are parts of the cannabis plant that have been used successfully for certain ailments. Epilepsy is one that comes to mind.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that last time.
We did talk about that last time. And there's a lot of benefits to the plant that you don't have to smoke. You don't have to smoke it to get the benefits, but there are some there. Right. But once again, you have to take the time to really study and take it apart and figure out, okay, what's helping and what's not helping.
There are dozens of components in the cannabis plant, and the most, obviously THC we know about. The most famous other one, we talked about this before, is CBD, which you see everywhere. Cannabidiol, which is, some people swear by as an anti-inflammatory, but it's only been really studied somewhat. There's only one FDA-approved medication that's based on cannabis, on CBD, and that's Pedialex, which is used for, as you said, in childhood epilepsy. Mm-hmm. That's an FDA. They did the clinical studies on that and marketed it. There are also you can get prescriptions for basically synthetic THC to Sativex, and there's a couple others. So, those are things that have been studied and that you can get prescribed with doses and everything, but for the most part, people are using it for lots of different ailments, but there's not really a lot of research on it. And there's a lot of potential. There's definitely a lot of potential in marijuana, but you have to find out what exactly in there. It might be a combination of CBD and THC or something else. So just consuming the whole plant because you have, say, Parkinson's disease or something, maybe get some relief. What caused it? It's a very strange. To me, it's a real strange reality that so many states have medical marijuana programs. New York State has a pretty good one. You can't when you buy medical marijuana, you need a doctor's prescription. There has to be a pharmacist in the dispensary. and you can't buy it in smokable form. You get
Right.
basically you're getting vape pens and you're vaping. You can get topicals too, but
I've
So-
seen you can get it in pill form, you can get it
Yeah.
in the vapes, and then you can just get it as an oil,
Yeah. A topical, yeah.
or something that you put. I know someone puts it in their food and then
Yeah.
eats it, and it helps them with their ailment.
Well, there's definitely a lot of as far as pain reduction, nausea. There are some things where it's definitely pretty accepted that it has medicinal uses.
Yeah.
And we mentioned, but
But I think that's definitely a conversation for another day, is to talk about the explosion of CBD products, because it definitely has just exploded. But we were
yeah.
kind of focusing
Well,
on the
It's related a little bit because
Yeah.
if people are vaping, you can buy CBD products now. In some states, I don't think you can in New York States, but people are vaping CBD also. So there's some concern that these recent illnesses might have been people vaping CBD. But it looks like they're mostly. So I mean, definitely kind of a public health warning to everybody to spread the word is that you can get really, really sick by by vaping cannabis oils that you buy. And they have these things, they call them pop-up markets, or people, even in California, in legal states, but people are, I mean, it's a huge business, and they'll pop up on a street corner and spreads through social media. We'll be here for a couple hours. People come here, buy this stuff. Or you can buy it online too, and it's real hard to control.
Like I said, it's hard with any drug, legal or I guess it would be illegal otherwise, that when you get it off the street, you don't know what's in it, and you're taking that roulette risk of what's going to happen when I use something off the street. Now, luckily, New York has, I think, a very good program for people who want to quit smoking. They have a hotline. They're willing to send you products that would help alleviate you off nicotine, whether it's the patch, the gum, probably some other ways. So those are definitely also alternatives if you're trying to quit smoking, is to call the public hotline. That you see it all the time on local stations. The New York State line, and they'll help you through stuff like that.
Right. I think bottom line, I mean, maybe to try and wrap things up or conclude a little bit, I mean, the Four Rivers Alliance is a coalition that really is trying to reduce youth substance use, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And I think what we tell kids is, and if you're a young person, you think you're indestructible, and, realizing you're actually very vulnerable, that your brain is going to develop into your early to mid 20s. So tell kids, it's like using anything, when you're in that window is not good. Marijuana, it can reduce your learning ability. You can develop a dependency. Nicotine, you can develop a severe addiction to it, which will result in mood disorders, among other things. Alcohol, obviously, always dangerous. Kids, the younger you start, the more likely you're to develop a lifelong addiction. We've talked about that. I had a sister start smoking when she was probably 13, 14. Smoked her whole life until she developed lung cancer and then had complications from surgery. And I think a lot of people have stories like that, but I mean, the data is really there that starting young is really bad, and that we really need to get the word out about vaping, that it's, not just water vapor, it's not just these cool flavors, that it's a nicotine delivery system that can really get you hooked and have a serious, impact on your life, including, the amount of money you're going to spend on the habit, when you don't have very much money. So that's what we work on, and I think as far as vaping, we're really trying to get the word out to people about what's in these devices, what's in this stuff that you're consuming, that it's not harmless. The word vape and vaping seem kind of suggest that's part of the problem. I mean, what could be wrong with vaping? It's just water vapor, but it's not. And of course, the huge trends in leasing the legal legal states for marijuana, with young people increasingly using concentrates from marijuana, including vape oils, waxes, dabbing with extremely high crystal forms of THC with extremely up to 80-90% THC, which is, what are the health effects of that? So we see these, things coming down the line. We're trying to head off a little bit as much as we can, kind of collision between perception of harm, marijuana legalization, the vaping epidemic with kids, and now we're seeing all these serious illnesses. So,
well, thank you, Pat, for coming in. I appreciate all the work that you guys do, and I hope for success in the future in your endeavors and everything that goes along with it, especially now that the school year has started. It's going to be start getting a little busier for you, hopefully, to get into schools and tell the kids all this stuff.
We try to. We're in the schools. We're educating kids and working with the administration, the health teachers, faculty, and schools in Hampden County who have been great in working with the prevention agencies, us, and also Hampden County. So we're really fortunate and really excited about some of the stuff we're doing and things we have coming up in the future. And of course, thank you to you, Gary, and Dackland Radio for continuing to do all you do as far as public service. It's a great asset to our area. Thanks.
All right, and remember, you can subscribe to the Dackland Radio YouTube channel down below, down the subscribe button. Hit the bell so you get notifications when programs such like this start up. And I hope to see you guys another time. Take care.